I sat in the beauty salon's break room, the soft hum of the wax heaters barely audible from the nearby treatment areas. The familiar scent of lavender and chamomile-infused oils lingered in the air, soothing and comforting. It was a fragrance I had come to link with long, exhausting days filled with anxious clients, calming chats, and the delicate task of helping people feel comfortable while I worked on their most intimate areas. I enjoyed my job, or at least the part of it that involved helping people feel better about themselves. Some clients were shy, their nervous giggles or downcast eyes clearly showing that exposing themselves even a little in front of me wasn't their idea of a fun afternoon. Others were confident, unbothered by anything, treating the process like any routine haircut. Over time, I'd learned to read people quickly, knowing who needed reassurance and who preferred silence. It had become second nature. At 42, life felt predictable, but I wasn't complaining. I had an 18-year-old son, Ethan, who was the joy of my life. He had his father's broad shoulders and my brown eyes, and though he was fiercely independent, he possessed a tenderness that always caught me off guard. He had recently started dating a girl named Lily, a sweet, artistic girl who seemed to adore him. Every time she came over, she brought baked goods wrapped in neatly tied ribbons, the scent of chocolate or cinnamon filling the house. I liked her, but part of me, one I wasn't proud of, felt a strange pang every time she laughed at something Ethan said or rested her head on his shoulder. He wasn't my little boy anymore. He was becoming someone else, someone I was struggling to hold on to. I shook off the thought as I finished my coffee. A knock on the break room door broke my reverie, and I looked up to see Heather, one of the younger estheticians. "Hey, Linda," she said, poking her head in. "Your 3 p.m. is here for a bikini wax." "Thanks, Heather," I replied, standing and smoothing out my uniform as I made my way to the treatment room. I tried to push my thoughts of Ethan aside. Work was a good distraction. For the next hour, I could focus on something I could control. That evening, the smell of marinara sauce filled the kitchen as I stirred a pot of pasta. Ethan was sitting at the island, scrolling through his phone, his hair still damp from his shower, curling slightly at the edges. "How was work?" he asked without looking up. "Busy," I answered, tasting the sauce and adding a pinch of salt. "Had a few nervous first-timers today, but overall it was fine." He grinned. "You must be a pro at calming people down by now." "I try," I smiled, but the ease of our conversation made me realize how rare moments like these were becoming. Between his school, his girlfriend, and his part-time job, we didn't get much time alone anymore. "Lily coming over tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. He shook his head. "Nah, she's busy with a project. Thought I'd stay in and hang out with you if that's okay." My heart lifted at his words. "Of course, it's okay. I'll take all the time I can get with you." After dinner, we settled on the couch to watch an old comedy, one that used to make him laugh until he cried when he was a kid. As the opening credits rolled, he shifted closer, his arm brushing against mine. It felt like old times, back when he'd rest his head on my shoulder and fall asleep halfway through the movie. Halfway through, I glanced over at him. His laughter had softened, his face illuminated by the TV's flickering glow. He looked content, relaxed, something I hadn't seen in a while. I reached over and ruffled his hair the way I used to when he was little. He chuckled, batting my hand away playfully. "You still do that?" he said, smiling. "Old habits die hard," I replied. For a moment, we sat in quiet comfort, the movie forgotten. I could feel the warmth of his presence beside me, the steady rise and fall of his breath. It was moments like this that reminded me how deeply our lives had been intertwined for so long. But things were shifting. He was growing up, falling in love, creating a life outside of me. The thought of him leaving, really leaving, tightened something in my chest. I knew it was natural, part of being a parent, but that didn't make it any easier. "You okay, Mom?" His voice was soft, concerned. I blinked, realizing I had been staring at the TV without actually seeing it. "Yeah, sweetie. Just tired, I guess." He nodded, but his gaze lingered on me, as if he could sense the emotions I wasn't saying out loud. Sometimes he was too perceptive for his own good. As the credits rolled, he stretched and yawned. "I think I'm going to head to bed." I watched him disappear up the stairs, the sound of his footsteps fading away. For a long time, I sat there, the house settling into a quiet hum around me. The warmth of the evening lingered, but so did the ache of knowing that these moments were fleeting. Tomorrow, he'd go back to school, back to Lily, back to the life that didn't revolve around me. And I would go back to work, to the hum of wax heaters and the scent of lavender oil, to clients who needed me to help them feel at ease. But tonight, I had him. And for now, that was enough. The next day, I had just finished cleaning up the treatment room when I checked the time. My last appointment was set for 6 p.m., and I figured it would be another client squeezing in some last-minute self-care before the weekend. I tidied up the supplies, my thoughts drifting to Ethan. He had left that morning without much conversation, mentioning something about meeting Lily for coffee and running errands. I figured I wouldn't see him until the next day. With the waxing table prepped and the room smelling faintly of warm honey and essential oils, I walked over to the front desk to check the appointment details. As I was about to scan the schedule, the bell above the entrance chimed, signaling the arrival of my last client. I looked up, expecting to see either a stranger or one of my regulars. Instead, I saw Ethan. He stood there casually, dressed in jeans and a fitted black t-shirt, his backpack slung over one shoulder. For a moment, I thought he had just come by to say hello or maybe ask for a ride home. But when his eyes met mine and he flashed that familiar, slightly mischievous smile, something inside me tensed. "Ethan," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" He walked closer, setting his backpack on the bench near the reception area. "I'm your last client," he said, as though it was the most normal thing in the world. My breath caught in my throat. He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly aware of my surprise, but maintaining his usual confidence. "I booked the appointment under a different name," he admitted with a small laugh. "Didn't want to make things weird when you saw it on the schedule." I blinked, struggling to process what he was saying. "Ethan, why?" he sighed, his gaze softening. "Lily invited me to stay over tonight," he said, lowering his voice. "And I wanted to surprise her. Thought it'd be a good idea to take care of some grooming." The air seemed to grow heavier as his words sank in, a weight settling between us. My mind raced in 1,000 directions. This wasn't just a casual visit to the salon. It was something much more personal and something I wasn't sure I was ready for. "I don't think—" He gently interrupted, stepping closer. "It's fine. Trust me. Who else would I go to for this? Some stranger who'd probably make me feel awkward the whole time?" I tried to speak, but no words came out. The logical part of me screamed that this situation wasn't right, that I should refuse and send him away. But the way he stood there, so confident and calm, made me hesitate. There was no shame in his expression, no trace of discomfort. He was acting as if this was just an everyday favor, like asking me to hem his pants or cut his hair. Maybe that was what made it so disarming. "Are you sure about this?" I managed to ask, my voice shaky. He nodded. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." I exhaled deeply, gripping the edge of the counter. "Okay," I said, though the word felt strange on my lips. "But if you feel uncomfortable at any time, we stop." "Understood," he replied with a warm, reassuring smile. I led him to the treatment room, my heart pounding as I tried to focus on preparing the supplies, pushing the whirlwind of emotions inside me aside. The low hum of the wax heater filled the quiet room. Ethan sat on the edge of the table, his eyes watching me with a calmness that both soothed and unsettled me. Clearing my throat, I asked, "What exactly do you want done?" He leaned back a little, propping himself on his hands. "Just the basics. Chest, stomach, maybe a bit lower too." The air seemed to thicken, and I felt my face flush. I'd done this procedure countless times before, but hearing those words from my son was a whole different experience. I forced myself to nod, keeping my professional demeanor in place. "Okay," I said, grabbing a pair of gloves. "Lie back, and we'll start with your chest." He complied, laying back and folding his arms behind his head. His t-shirt was already off, revealing the toned muscles of his chest and the faint hair that trailed down his stomach. I had seen him shirtless many times before, at the beach, around the house. But this felt different, more intentional. As I applied the warm wax to his chest, I tried to keep my focus on the task, but my thoughts kept drifting. I couldn't stop noticing how close we were, how his body reacted to my touch in subtle ways, the slight twitch of his muscles, the way his breathing quickened when the wax first made contact. "You okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," he replied, eyes closed. "It feels fine." I pressed the cloth strip over the wax, smoothing it down before pulling it off quickly. He flinched but didn't make a sound. "See, not so bad," I said, trying to make light of the situation. He chuckled, the sound warm and familiar. "I've had worse. Remember when I fell off my bike and scraped half my body on the pavement?" I laughed softly, grateful for the distraction. "You cried for hours." "I did not," he protested, grinning. The tension in the room seemed to ease, replaced by a more familiar, comfortable atmosphere. We chatted about random things, his classes, Lily's love for baking, funny stories from his part-time job. It almost felt normal, like any other conversation we might have over dinner. But underneath, my mind was still racing. When I finished his chest and stomach, I paused before speaking. "You said you wanted me to do lower?" He opened his eyes and met my gaze. "If you're okay with it." I swallowed, my fingers tightening around the edge of the waxing pot. Was I okay with it? I wasn't sure. But the trust in his eyes, the way he looked at me like I was the only person he could turn to, made it impossible to say no. "Okay," I whispered, barely able to speak. He nodded, shifting slightly to give me access. As I worked, I tried to stay focused on the task, blocking out the emotions that kept threatening to overwhelm me. But it wasn't easy. Every brush of my fingers, every subtle movement made me feel a weight I couldn't shake. When it was over, I stepped back, removing my gloves and exhaling shakily. "All done." He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Thanks, Mom," he said softly, his gaze warm. "I really appreciate it." I forced a smile, but my heart was still pounding. "Of course." As he gathered his things and left the room, I sank into the nearest chair, my mind reeling. This wasn't just a favor between mother and son. There was an emotional weight here that I didn't fully understand, and I wasn't sure how to handle it. When I got home that evening, the house was bathed in the soft golden glow of the setting sun, the light filtering through the curtains and casting long shadows across the floor. I took off my shoes and set my bag down, trying to shake the emotions that still clung to me from earlier at the salon. My hands were still trembling slightly, and I felt like I hadn't taken a real breath since Ethan had walked out of that treatment room. I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. "It's fine," I told myself. "He's your son. It's no different than what you do for clients every day." But logic didn't help. My mind was stuck in a loop, replaying the sensation of his warm skin under my hands, the way he trusted me without hesitation, and how my heart had raced with emotions I wasn't prepared to deal with. I tried to distract myself with small tasks, tidying the living room, loading the dishwasher, checking my phone for missed messages, but nothing seemed to quiet the thoughts gnawing at me. A soft thud echoed from upstairs. Ethan's room. He was still home. Hesitant, I made my way up the stairs, my heart pounding with each step as if I was approaching something I couldn't control. At the top of the stairs, I saw his bedroom door slightly ajar, the faint scent of his cologne drifting into the hallway. That familiar blend of cedarwood and citrus filled the air, and for a moment I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by how strongly everything about him lingered in my senses. Peering into his room, I saw him standing in front of his mirror, adjusting the collar of a tight black shirt that fit him perfectly. His hair was styled neatly, and the soft light from the evening made him appear older, more mature, more confident. The realization unsettled me. It was as though I was watching someone who was no longer entirely mine. He caught my reflection in the mirror and turned around, smiling softly. "Hey, Mom," he said warmly. "Just getting ready to head out." I stepped into the room, trying to keep my voice steady. "You look nice." I swallowed hard, hoping he wouldn't notice the tension in my voice. "Lily's going to be impressed," I added. He chuckled, tugging at his shirt one last time before turning to face me. "You think?" I didn't go too overboard, did I? "No," I replied quickly, shaking my head. "You look great." The black shirt clung to his body, emphasizing the broadness of his shoulders and the lean lines of his torso. His jeans fit perfectly, and the scent of his cologne almost intoxicated me. I hated myself for noticing, but I couldn't help it. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand and slipped it into his pocket. "Lily and I are just staying in tonight. She's making dinner." "That sounds nice," I murmured, though my words felt hollow. My mind was clouded with conflicting emotions. I needed him to leave, to give me space to think clearly. But at the same time, I dreaded the silence that would follow. As if sensing my unease, he walked over and hugged me. His arms wrapped around me firmly, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The warmth of his embrace, the familiarity of it, mixed with something new and unfamiliar, left me feeling weightless and heavy at the same time. He kissed me lightly on the cheek, the simple gesture stirring a storm inside me. "Don't be sad when I'm not here," he said softly, his breath warm against my skin. "I won't be gone long." I forced a weak smile, hoping he couldn't see the turmoil in my eyes. "I'm fine," I lied. "Go have fun." He pulled back, his gaze lingering a moment longer than usual. "By the way," he added, his tone playful, "I liked today's appointment. You were right. It wasn't so bad." I forced a small laugh. "I'm glad." He grinned. "I think I'll be your regular client from now on." The thought made my stomach flip, an unsettling mix of anxiety and something more dangerous. "You don't have to do that," I said, trying to sound casual. "There are plenty of other salons." "But I trust you," he interrupted, his voice gentle yet firm. "It's not weird for me, Mom. You make it easy." The weight of his words settled heavily on me, and I nodded, unable to find the right response. He trusted me, but the problem wasn't his trust. It was the feelings I couldn't suppress, no matter how hard I tried. "Thanks again," he said, giving my hand a small squeeze before heading for the door. "See you tomorrow." As the door closed behind him, I collapsed onto the edge of his bed, my hands trembling in my lap. The sound of his car starting in the driveway brought me back to reality, grounding me in the present. When the engine faded into the distance, the silence of the house enveloped me. I sat there, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to confront. Every time I tried to push them away, they came back stronger. Why did I feel this way? It wasn't normal, and I knew it. Ethan was my son, my little boy who used to fall asleep in my lap, who begged me for just one more bedtime story. But he wasn't that little boy anymore, and that was the problem. He had grown up, and somewhere along the way, my role in his life had shifted in ways I hadn't expected. I hated these feelings that had taken root inside me. I hated how my heart raced when I thought about him, how his presence seemed to fill the room and leave me breathless. I had always been proud of the bond we shared, the closeness that had carried us through tough times. But now, that bond felt like a double-edged sword, cutting deeper than I could handle. I buried my face in my hands, overwhelmed by everything crashing down on me. I couldn't let this continue. I had to find a way to distance myself, to remind myself of the boundaries that should never be crossed. But even as I sat there, promising myself that tomorrow would be different, a part of me knew it wouldn't be that simple. The feelings were already tangled and messy, refusing to be ignored. The more I tried to suppress them, the more they seemed to grow. I stood up, my legs unsteady as I made my way to my bedroom. The bed felt cold, unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. I wrapped the blanket around me, hoping sleep would bring some clarity, some relief. But as I closed my eyes, all I could think about was the warmth of Ethan's hug, the scent of his cologne lingering in the air, and the way he had looked at me before leaving. I knew I had to let go of these feelings, but I also knew it would be the hardest thing I'd ever done.